AskReddit by deleted. What's a fact or saying that gets repeated constantly on Reddit that just isn't true? Every time someone recommends suing their job, it's almost always complete bullshit based on some law that's passed through 100 games of telephone from other redditors. Also, laws are vastly different all over the world, so unless someone is asking and replying with a specific location in mind, all of this advice is just completely pointless. Just do what makes you happy and ignore the haters. Never accounts for the fact that being a dick makes a lot of people happy. It doesn't cost anything to be nice. Well, being an asshole is also free. When people said I'm afraid I might be a narcissist, Reddit always answers something along no, you care about being one so you can't be a narcissist. A true narcissist would not care. And of course, it's not true. Narcissism, like everything else, is a spectrum. You can have people that are extremely narcissist and are totally unaware of it, but you can have people not that far in the spectrum of narcissism that still are narcissist, but are aware of it. Same with borderline personality disorder and other things. Yeah, it's the same logic as people with schizophrenia or DID are always unaware they have it. Being aware of mental illness doesn't make it suddenly go away. Not just Reddit, but the idea that the Library of Alexandria was burned down and its books were lost. While there were indeed some fires at the library, they were all localized, and there is no evidence that one conflagration destroyed the entire thing. Rather, as Alexandria's importance declined, so did the libraries, and repeated battles destroyed more of it than fires did. The interesting thing is that the books were likely transferred to a library called the Serapeum, which was destroyed and burned on the order of a Christian bishop. It's debated whether or not the Serapeum still contained books when it burned. https://www.degruiter.com/document/10.15/clio-2021-0021/html. Jack Gleason, Joffrey from Game of Thrones, got so much hate for his role that he quit acting. The truth is he quit for his own personal reasons and has gone on record saying he's only ever met nice people in regards to fans. For your information, a lot of child actors, which he was at the start of season 1, end up quitting acting as adults. People who act it's a sin to comment on an old thread. There's no point in having 10,000 threads about the same topic, and sometimes mega threads aren't available. I love when I comment a solution to something, then a year or so after someone replies going this helped. Thank you. Feels good to know that it's helping more than just the OP. You can't use the keys in the wrong order in the water temple. Yup. I even know the one that everyone always misses too. It is impossible to get soft locked in that game. That there's no such thing as bad publicity. This can be true for small companies where being known for something bad is better than not being known at all. But if this statement were always true, then corporations wouldn't have PR departments and they'd be saying wild shit every day on purpose. This happens every time someone brings up a shitty commercial. Someone will smugly waltz in with a "well, you're talking about it, aren't you? Yeah, we're talking about how this commercial makes us not want to use your product." Bad overplayed marketing will absolutely create a negative association with your brand name. Did you know the charity donation request at shops gives them a tax break seems to be repeated a lot. So when I go to McDonald's and they ask if I want to round my order up to the nearest dollar for whatever charity, there is zero benefit to McDonald's for asking me that. Many people on Reddit are 100% certain that opossums eat thousands of ticks per night. They just don't, and you will be downvoted to oblivion for pointing it out most of the time. Ticks are tiny and it would take an opossum days to eat enough for a full meal. Do they eat ticks sometimes? Sure, but the ticks they eat are mostly removed during their own grooming. And they would much rather be eating a rotten animal corpse on the side of the road, or breaking into the farmer's coop to kill and eat their chicken's eggs. They will eat anything that they can to survive and reproduce. That opossum is the only correct name for the American animal, and possum is exclusively to be used for a range of marsupials in New Zealand. In truth, the word possum has roots in the English language predating English-speaking culture in New Zealand. The clear distinction between the two names is often cited and accepted as pedantically factual, not just on Reddit but in the academic community, even though it's a recent development within those schools. There is nothing incorrect about calling the American animal a possum. It's a common colloquialism that has held its meaning for longer than any of us have been alive. That's a HIPAA violation. Bonus points if they spell it HIPAA. 99% of the time when you see this on Reddit, it's not a HIPAA violation. Did you even read Testory? My doctor was rude to me. That's a HIPAA violation and is A against a Hippocratic oath. Not a specific fact, but a lot of Redditors have problems with stereotyping and generalizations, often unable to separate the part from the whole. Just because you belong to a group or are assigned to it, doesn't imbue you with a set of thoughts, characteristics, or beliefs. Even within belief systems and ideologies, there is a wide amount of variation. Judge individuals on who they are, not their perceived identities. The other big one is that they always think breaking up is the right and only solution. People generally prefer to believe the same thing they've been believing rather than have their biases challenged. It's not particularly surprising, but it does make it hard to have healthy discussions with most Redditors. I see people say low-fat stuff just has more sugar all the time, and lately I've started checking labels on low-fat stuff and it just doesn't seem to be true for most things. I remember seeing a comment from someone on Reddit where they said this was more of a thing back in the 90s, hence why people believe it. Only seems to apply to desserts. This is a mental health issue. I can't stand that shit. Very few people here on Reddit are qualified to make that judgment in a professional setting, but none of us, including the professionals, are qualified to make that judgment from a 30-second TikTok video without context. I think mental health gets thrown around a lot cause as humans we need reasons for why things happen instead of being okay with the idea that some people are just off, without it being a mental illness. That the frontal lobe isn't fully developed until the age of 25. While this is not entirely incorrect, the best I could find about the subject when digging through sources was this paper, "N really mature at the age of 25-68,979, which makes it clear that while the frontal lobe might only grow to its full physical size at around age 25, that does not mean that mental faculties are only fully and completely developed at 25. The correlations between physical size and mental capacity is not established to that degree, but in comments on Reddit and elsewhere this argument, which I have seen and heard a million times over the last couple of years, is always used in the context of mental faculties, which is wrong. Similarly, if there's more than a 5-year age difference in a couple, the older person is definitely grooming the younger person. A 32-year-old is not grooming a 24-year-old. Redditors are oddly panicked by this kind of thing. The fact that so many techniques of modern CGI animation were derived from people making R34 Art of Elizabeth from Bioshock Infinite. That was just a meme that got out of control. I have never heard of this. And I'm an animator lol. I'm going to be downvoted for saying this, but almost always, the comment has positive karma. There could be some survivorship bias there. You don't see the comments that start with that and get downvoted into oblivion. Pit bulls were never called nanny dogs. People conveniently, also for the staffy, like to leave out the terrier part of them. The APBT is the biggest, strongest and largest terrier there is, with a tremendous bite force and temperament, which is epic in the right hands. This is my biggest pet peeve, especially when people are like, oh why did my app react badly to my small crawling child a cat etc. That's because it's a fucking terrier that's made to want to hunt small running things. Next. Both the koala and mola mola ocean sunfish, copper pastas. Additionally, I believe that they have response copper pastas that debunk them. I must not spend enough time on Reddit. I've never seen these copper pastas. In what subreddit might one have a chance to encounter them? The myth that Marie Antoinette said, in French, "Let them eat cake." Cake is a bad translation and it wasn't her that said it. If I remember correctly, the correct translation is more akin to brioche. In the time when the quote was written down mentioned, Marie Antoinette would have been a child. People on Reddit, the internet in general, always say Japan has a high suicide rate compared to the US. This was true in the early 2000s, but not anymore. Somewhat surprising considering how poorly their economy is doing in contrast to the US's. The gap in suicide rates has shrunk, though Japan does still have a decently higher suicide rate than America. Medieval peasants worked less than we do currently. Absolutely not. They may, technically, have worked less days, but even on their days off, hours would have been spent working with the animals, and there are no 8-hour work days in agriculture, which is the work 90% of everyone would have been doing. You dodged a bullet, usually in response to someone who just got out a relationship where their ex murdered their entire family and made OP have tea parties with the corpses for a year. Might be a slight exaggeration, but lately there was one where OP had caught her would-be husband, on their wedding day, having sex with one of the bridesmaids. So just to really think about that, this woman was in love with a man to the point of wanting to spend her life with him. She also had a friend close enough that she was chosen to be a bridesmaid. The two of them betrayed OP on a day where at least dozens of relatives and friends were expecting to see them get married. A situation that would surely break anyone's heart into tiny pieces and do serious damage to their ability to trust. Guess what phrase people couldn't resist replying with? FR, girl straight up got shot. Sure, she avoided marriage, but she was severely wounded in the process. Dodged a bullet should be reserved for stuff like, I went on one date with a guy, he was kinda weird so I didn't go on a second date. 3 months later I saw on the news that he was a serial killer. Divorce is the only resolution to relationship issues. I wouldn't say Reddit, but a lot of social media. Lot of people who are too chronically online take simple cracks in a relationship as something to be dealt with divorce. One case in particular was a vlogging family when the husband began making music about how he has the perfect wife and kid, yet sometimes he couldn't be happy and he needed more, and it bothered him. People read that like that ungrateful pose. How can he treat his wife that way? What turned out to actually happen was that he was silently suffering in depression and struggled because his life was so perfect and picturesque according to the internet, so he had no reason to be, but still was. Many failing to realize that marriage and family has its downsides that led many to depression. And he used music to convey subtly to his wife what he was going through it without outright saying it to not incur the wrath of the internet, since they were vlogging their entire life. That corporations are buying up all single family homes in the US. This has happened in a few markets but is not nearly as widespread as Reddit makes it out to be. 1-5% of all single family homes are corporately owned, but the vast majority of those are family LLCs. Good one. People often misread the numbers on the number of corporate buyers. Almost every house in my immediate vicinity in central Austin sold in the past several years was sold to a developer first, who fixed up the place that had barely been touched in decades, then sold it to a single family owner once it was in move-in condition. Most people don't want a rundown old house, or to deal with renovations on their own. The developers are providing a needed service. But that led to numbers like 50% of home sales were to corporations, because the house sold twice, once to a developer and then to the family living there. People see that and wrongly claim half of houses are owned by corporations. No, the house was only briefly owned by a corporation while being refurbished.